Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaffirms India's call for peace in talks with President Zelenskyy, vows support for conflict resolution and stronger India-Ukraine ties. India slams Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir for his reported remarks in the United States. The Ministry of External Affairs says nuclear saber rattling is Pakistan's stock in trade. The upcoming Putin-Trump summit in Alaska sparks fears among EU leaders of a one-sided land swap. Zelenskyy says concessions will not make Russia end war. And Israeli Defense Forces killed 6 in Gaza, including 5 Al Jazeera journalists, while accusing them of posing as scribes while working for the Hamas. UN and several world leaders condemned the move. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday held a telephonic conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. During the call, Zelenskyy shared his views on the recent developments related to Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi thanked President Zelenskyy and reaffirmed India's steadfast and consistent position for peaceful settlement of the conflict and support for efforts aimed at earliest restoration of peace. The PM reiterated India's commitment to extend all possible support. The leaders also reviewed progress in the India-Ukraine bilateral partnership and discussed ways to further enhance cooperation in areas of mutual interest. They also agreed to remain in touch. But India has responded strongly to remarks made reportedly by Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir during a visit to the United States. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs said, and I quote, "Our attention has been drawn to remarks reportedly made by Pakistani Chief of Army Staff while on a visit to the United States. Nuclear saber rattling is Pakistan's stock in trade. The international community can draw its own conclusions on the irresponsibility inherent in such remarks, which also reinforce the well-held doubts about the integrity of nuclear command and control in a state where the military is hand in glove with terrorist groups. It is also regrettable that these remarks should have been made from the soil of a friendly third country. India has already made it clear that it will not give in to nuclear blackmail. We will continue to take all steps necessary to safeguard our national security." End quote. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defended a newly approved Gaza City plan, calling it the best way to end the war. Addressing international media on Sunday, he said Israel must defeat the Hamas, citing their refusal to disarm. Netanyahu said the military expansion in Gaza aims to bring a swift end to the Gaza war after seizing the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in the enclave.
If Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages, Gaza will be demilitarized, Israel will have overriding security responsibility, a security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel.
Now, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting to address Israel's decision to expand its military operations and take control of Gaza City. The session, that was requested by several European members, focused on the worsening humanitarian crisis and the potential consequences for Gaza's 2 million residents and remaining hostages. Israeli and Palestinian ambassadors offered starkly different narratives of the situation and solutions needed to end the conflict in Gaza. Addressing all the other diplomats, Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour said that words were not enough to stop the harm.
If its concern was actually security, it would have rallied this plan and should have been happy to see this plan adopted by almost the entire international community. Israel is seeking to cement its full military control over the Gaza Strip. and is prolonging this war not to end Hamas rule or to disarm it, but to prevent independent Palestinian statehood.
The Israeli ambassador, on the other hand, countered the characterization of Israel as the aggressor, noting that the objective has been to liberate Gaza from a brutal terror regime.
I wish to reiterate the principles, the 5 clear principles that the Israeli Security Cabinet adopted for concluding the war. 1, the disarming of Hamas. 2, the return of all our hostages, both living and deceased. 3, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. 4, Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip. 5, the establishment of a non-Israeli peaceful civil administration governed neither by Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority.
The United States, a veto-wielding permanent member of the Security Council, accused those nations who supported Sunday's meeting of actively prolonging the war by spreading lies about Israel.
The most recent round of negotiations collapsed because Hamas drew encouragement from efforts to target Israel with libels and lies. The ill-conceived and performative two-state solution conference and unilateral announcements regarding recognition of a Palestinian state. The government of Israel did not make its decision to advance its military campaign in a vacuum, but after months of Hamas's intransigence. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages.
And now, Australia has announced to recognize the Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. That's what Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced on Monday. He also said that he had received assurances from the Palestinian Authority that there would be no role for the terrorists of Hamas in any future Palestinian state. Several countries, including France, Britain and Canada, have announced plans to recognize statehood for Palestinians since Israel launched a bombardment of Gaza nearly 2 years ago in response to the Hamas attack. Albanese said Australia will work with the international community to get this through.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality.
Meanwhile, Israel's military has issued a statement saying it targeted and killed Hamas terrorist Anas al-Sharif, who posed as an Al Jazeera journalist in a strike on Sunday. Israel claimed that al-Sharif headed a Hamas cell and was involved in rocket attacks on Israeli civilians and IDF troops. IDF added that intelligence and documents from Gaza, including rosters, terrorist training lists and salary records, prove that al-Sharif was a Hamas operative integrated into Al Jazeera. The Qatari broadcaster said 3 others of its staff have also been killed in this attack. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said on Monday that concessions to Russia would not persuade it to stop fighting in Ukraine and that there was no need to ramp up pressure on the Kremlin. Zelenskyy also warned against fulfilling the demands of Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of Friday talks between the Russian leader and US President Donald Trump. The US-Russia summit, which is planned without Zelenskyy, will be the first between a sitting US and Russian president since 2021. The head of the EU diplomatic service, Kaja Kallas, has called a meeting of EU foreign ministers to discuss the upcoming Russia-US summit on Ukraine. Kaja Kallas said on Sunday that any deal between Washington and Moscow to end the conflict in Ukraine must include Ukraine and the EU, adding that she will continue a meeting of European foreign ministers to discuss the next steps. On Saturday, the leaders of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Finland and the European Commission said any diplomatic solution must protect the security interests of Ukraine and Europe. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance has said the United States has been working to schedule talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In an interview on Sunday, he said he did not think it would be productive for Putin to sit down with Zelenskyy before meeting with Donald Trump. Vance also added that his administration was hoping to reach a negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine, but warned that both sides would probably be unhappy with the outcome.
One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelenskyy, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. We're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops.
South Korea and Vietnam pledged deeper economic and strategic cooperation as their leaders held a summit on Monday. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is hosting Vietnamese leader Lam as his first state guest since taking office on the 4th of June and discussed promoting trade and investment in the Southeast Asian country. The two countries signed 10 memoranda of understanding for cooperation in energy, finance and science and technology. They also agreed to further open their markets and expand bilateral trade to $150 billion by 2030.
Our countries agreed that about 10,000 Korean companies operating in Vietnam contribute to Vietnam's economic development and mutually beneficial cooperation between the two countries. I asked for a continued interest in the stable economic activities of our companies in Vietnam.
The two countries will continue to open their markets to each other and work together to achieve bilateral trade of $150 billion by 2030.
Indonesia and Peru also signed a free trade agreement on Monday to strengthen bilateral trade and investment relations. Leaders of both the countries said at a signing ceremony in Jakarta. Indonesian exports to Peru totaled $331.2 million worth of goods in 2024, while imports from Peru stood at $149.6 million. Indonesia's top export products were cars and car parts, biodiesel and footwear, while it mainly imported cocoa beans and grapes from Peru. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto said that the two countries would also increase cooperation in sectors like food, fisheries, mining, energy transition and defense. US President Trump has called on China to significantly increase soybean imports from the United States, suggesting it could help narrow Beijing's trade deficit with Washington. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said he hoped China would quickly quadruple its soybean orders, calling it a win for both the nations and a boost for American farmers. His remarks sent Chicago soybean prices up by over 2% on Monday. China, the world's biggest soy importer, has recently turned to South American suppliers amid trade and diplomatic tensions, even as negotiations between the US and Chinese officials go on. US stock indices in its futures were little changed on Monday as investors geared up for a busy week, while major chip companies seemed caught in the middle of the latest twist in trade policy ahead of the 12th of August deadline. Semiconductor giant Nvidia dropped 1% in pre-market trading and Advanced Micro Devices lost 2%. According to US officials, the companies had agreed to give the United States government 15% of their revenue from the sales of their advanced computer chips to China. Sale of the semiconductors was an integral issue in the US agreement with China signed earlier this year and could strain the relationship between the two economies just before Tuesday's deadline for the deal's expiration. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. Prime Minister Modi inaugurates 184 newly constructed Type 7 multi-story flats for members of Parliament. India's lower house passes 3 important bills, including the new Income Tax Act bill that is amidst ruckus in Parliament. And India marks a milestone as Kargil's sun-kissed apricots make their debut in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Qatar, ushering in a new era for the nation's fruit exports.
complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated 184 newly constructed Type 7 multi-story flats for members of Parliament at Baba Khadak Singh Marg in New Delhi on Monday. Prime Minister Modi planted a sindoor sapling at the residential premises, and he also interacted with Shramjeevis or construction workers on the occasion. Addressing the event, Prime Minister Modi said that naming the towers after India's major rivers reflects their life-giving and unifying significance, promoting national unity despite potential political misinterpretations.
ये जो 4 टावर्स हैं, उनके नाम भी बहुत सुंदर है। कृष्णा, गोदावरी, कोसी, हुगली, भारत की 4 महान नदियां जो करोड़ों जनों को जीवन देती हैं। अब उनकी प्रेरणा से हमारे जनप्रतिनिधियों के जीवन में भी आनंद की नई धारा बहेगी। कुछ लोगों को परेशानी भी होगी। कोसी नदी देख रखा है नाम, तो उनको कोसी नदी नहीं दिखेगी, उनको बिहार का चुनाव नजर आएगा। तो ऐसे छोटे मन के लोग जो होते हैं, उनकी परेशानियों के बीच भी मैं जरूर कहूँगा कि नदियों के नामों की परंपरा देश की एकता के सूत्र में हमें बांधती है।
Further, the PM said that gathering of MPs from across the country here will reflect the spirit of unity and Ek Bharat, Shreshtha Bharat.
यहां देश के अलग अलग राज्यों और क्षेत्रों के सांसद एक साथ रहेंगे। आपकी उपस्थिति यहां एक भारत श्रेष्ठ भारत का प्रतीक बनेगी। इसलिए अगर इस परिसर में हर प्रांत के पर्व त्योहारों का समय समय पर सामूहिक आयोजन होगा, तो इस परिसर को 4 चांद लग जाएंगे। आप अपने क्षेत्र की जनता को भी बुलाकर इन कार्यक्रमों में उनकी भागीदारी करवा सकते हैं। आप अपने अपने प्रांतों की भाषा के कुछ शब्द भी एक दूसरे को सिखाने का प्रयास कर सकते हैं। सस्टेनेबिलिटी और स्वच्छता, ये भी इस बिल्डिंग की पहचान बने, ये हम सबका कमिटमेंट होना चाहिए।
Now, the complex is designed to be self-sufficient and is equipped with a full range of modern amenities to address the functional needs of the members of Parliament, incorporating green technology. All buildings within the complex are constructed to be earthquake resistant in accordance with modern structural design norms. A comprehensive and robust security system has been implemented to ensure the safety of all residents. Now let's get to the latest from the ongoing monsoon session of India's Parliament. The Lok Sabha or the lower house passed 3 important bills amidst uproar in Parliament by opposition parties on voters' registration issue. The lower house passed the National Sports Governance Bill 2024 and the Anti-Doping Amendment Bill 2025, which will pave the way for better governance and welfare of the sports community in India. The historic bills will also set the stage for India's bid for hosting the Olympics in the near future with improved infrastructure and better management. The bills were moved by Minister for Youth Affairs and Sports Mansukh Mandavia in the lower house and was passed with a voice vote. And the Lok Sabha also passed the Income Tax No. 2 Bill 2025 and the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2025. Now, these 2 bills aim to streamline the income tax laws in India and also change the old 1960s income tax laws helping individuals to file their income information with ease. And where the upper house is concerned, there is the Rajya Sabha. It passed the readjustment of representation of scheduled tribes in assembly constituencies of the state of Goa Bill 2025. The bill was earlier passed by the Lok Sabha. Now, the Chief of the Australian Army, Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, who's on a 5-day visit to India, received a ceremonial guard of honour at the South Block Lawns in New Delhi on Monday. The dignitary's visit is scheduled from the 11th to the 14th of this month. The visit marks a significant reunion of the two military professionals whose shared past strengthens the foundation of India-Australia defence ties. Elaborating on defence diplomacy, the statement highlighted that shared training experiences between military leaders often sow the seeds for enduring partnerships that outlast political cycles and strategic shifts. India's Supreme Court has issued strict directives to free Delhi NCR from stray dogs, citing public safety and the risk of rabies. The court ordered the Delhi government, civic bodies and other concerned authorities to remove stray dogs from streets and place them in shelter homes, beginning with 5,000 dogs within 6 weeks. Authorities have been told to build shelters, deploy adequate staff for sterilization and install CCTV monitoring. Any individual or group obstructing the drive will face court action. The court stressed that newborns and young children must be protected from rabies exposure and all instructions should be implemented without delay. In a first, apricots from Kargil are making their way to markets in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Qatar, marking a new milestone for India's fruit exports. India's Minister for Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, announced the development on X, highlighting that 1.5 metric tons of the fruit have been shipped under the One District, One Product and Vocal for Local global outreach initiatives. Minister Goyal mentioned that the move reflects growing international demand for Indian produce and underscores the Modi government's commitment to boosting farmers' incomes. The Har Ghar Tiranga campaign encourages every Indian to bring the Tiranga home and proudly hoist it in celebration of the nation's independence. Addressing a press conference, Union Minister for Culture and Tourism, Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, said, "The tricolour instills the same pride in us today as it did in the past when our freedom fighters carried Tiranga as a symbol of India's independence and sovereignty."
जब व्यक्ति हाथ में तिरंगा लेकर के खड़ा होता है और सम्मान के साथ में अपने घर की छत पर, अपने घर की बालकनी पर, अपने प्रतिष्ठान में तिरंगे को लहराता है, तो निश्चित रूप से उसके मन में वही भाव होता है जो भाव शहीद आजम भगत सिंह या उस समय के स्वतंत्रता सेनानियों के मन में था। नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस से लेकर के अनेक स्वतंत्रता सेनानियों ने इस तिरंगे को साक्षी मान करके देश को आजाद कराने के लिए जिस भाव के साथ में संघर्ष किया था, आज भी जब हम तिरंगे को लेकर के खड़े होते हैं, 75 साल की आज़ादी और उससे भी अधिक समय बीत जाने के बाद आज भी हमारे मन में देश के भक्ति का एक ज्वार जो है इस तिरंगे के साथ में उठता है।
Now for some sports updates, and in FA Cup winners Crystal Palace have beaten Premier League champions Liverpool 3-2 on penalties to win the Community Shield after an entertaining 2-2 draw at Wembley on Sunday. The match showcased debutants, dramatic moments and a standout performance from goalkeeper Dean Henderson, who proved to be the hero in the shootout. This win marks Palace's second major trophy in recent months, following their FA Cup success in May, and signals their ambition for the new season. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. Just scan the QR code there on the screen and download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.